Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Muslim Sex Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate your patronage, and I would love it if you could leave me a 5-star review because that really helps me. And if you could like and share this episode with somebody that you know that may benefit, your friend, your colleague, anyone, I'd really love you to share this podcast, especially if you find value in the Muslim Sex Podcast. Also, I'd love for you to subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on all my social media. Also, as you probably know, if you've been listening to this podcast, is that I have a practice that is now open in Chappaqua, New York. I see patients for menopause and sexual health, as well as regular gynecology. So if you are looking for a gynecologist that actually spends time with you, that has time to listen to you, then I would invite you to come and see me in my practice, and I'd be more than happy to take care of you. So make sure if you live in the New York area, or even if you don't, come and see me in my office. I'd love to meet you. And also, last but not least, is that I am hosting again my retreat in Morocco for 2025. So if you are looking for a gift for a family member, a friend, yourself, make sure you take a look at our retreat, the Love and Nourish Retreat. It will be held September 19th through the 26th, 2025. Again, this year in Morocco, we will be visiting the same towns. We will be in Marrakesh and Essaouira. And as always, we will be providing information and lectures on menopause, perimenopause, nutrition, and also going for cooking classes as well as excursions. So don't miss out. I know a lot of people were sad when they missed out this past year on the Morocco retreat. So make sure that you go and visit the Love and Nourish Retreat hosted by Caria Retreats. And now onto the episode. I am an American board certified OBGYN, a mom, a Muslim, and I'm talking about sex. This is the Muslim Sex Podcast. Welcome to the Muslim Sex Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sadaf Lodi, and this episode is everything you need to know about talking about sex with your partner and what are ways that you can navigate that conversation and why do we find it so hard to do? Before I get into it, some important things. One is, of course, this is not any type of medical information. So if you have any questions about your sexual health, feel free to reach out to your healthcare provider. And of course, if you have any questions about your religion, feel free to speak with your friendly neighborhood religious leader. This is the Muslim Sex Podcast because I just happen to be a Muslim woman that talks about sex. So today I'm super excited to have on with me again my friend and sex therapist, Sarah Hunt. Welcome back to the podcast, Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy.
Yes, we love having you on. So, Sarah, I know that you and I were talking a little bit offline about couples and why they find it so hard to talk about sex and have these very important conversations. And I talk about this on the podcast all the time, but I'd love to hear your perspective coming from a sex therapist on ways to navigate this topic and why perhaps we have such a hard time talking about it.
Yes. So there are so many reasons that we struggle to talk about sex. And one of them is that many of us were not shown how. We didn't get great sex education in school. Our parents didn't talk about it with us other than maybe saying, just don't do it.
Yeah.
And sex scenes in movies and TV usually don't show characters talking about it. We just see this passion and excitement without a lot of the context of what happens in real life.
Right.
So many of us have this misconception that you shouldn't have to talk about sex, that it should just happen naturally, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And that if we have to talk about it, that means there's a problem. And if there's a problem, that makes us feel shame. And we don't like to feel shame, so we don't like to talk about it.
Yeah, 100%. I think that that's so important. What you just noted is the images that we see in, the media and how they portray sex and how it should be so spontaneous, right? Like nothing about it is responsive. It's like this spontaneous, like crazy desire, right? Like all of a sudden just overtakes an individual and they have no idea what's going on. It's just kind of like this like this inner desire that just takes over everything, right? And they're just like just tearing off each other's clothes and all this crazy stuff. And it makes it seem as if like people are just animals and they just have no control, and they're not using their intellect, they're just going on their base, like feelings. And that really is not the case. And I'm hoping that what you go over with your patients, I'm sure is something very different. So I'd love to hear what you tell your really your clients.
Yeah, sure. I also want to speak to what you just said too, that there's because of what we see in the media, there's this common misperception that everyone else is having amazing sex.
Yes.
And so we feel like
Mhm.
we're the only ones who are struggling. We feel alone and embarrassed. And I am here to tell you everyone struggles with sex at some point, myself included, and I'm
True.
a sex therapist.
Yeah, thank you. See, I'm so glad you're normalizing that, because that's so important to hear, especially coming from a sex therapist, and so important to know, right?
Right. And other reasons that it can be hard to talk about sex with our partner is some people, I mean, we fear being judged by our partner for what we bring up. We fear hurting our partner's feelings. We don't want, them to feel bad. And then other times we simply just don't know what to say or how to bring it up. We might know that something feels off or wrong, like what doesn't feel good, but we don't always know what we do want or what does feel good, which then makes it hard to know how to talk about it or what to bring up.
Yeah. I think you bring up a great point. I think that there is a lot of shame and embarrassment, especially if, say, you haven't had much experience in your life, right? And perhaps maybe the other person has, or perhaps neither of the two have had any experience. And so then they don't really know what sex is supposed to feel like or what they're supposed to be feeling. And I think you mentioned this the last time we talked about purity culture, and how, a lot of times people will get ingrained in their minds that sex is wrong, it's dirty, it's shameful. So then I think those thoughts also play like a soundtrack in somebody's head. And so then they feel like, well, maybe I'm already supposed to know about this. And because I don't, there's something wrong with my education, or I'm less than, perhaps my partner is, without ever even discussing with them what they know. And then they never have that conversation because they're just so afraid about what the answer might be. And that answer might be that the other person doesn't know either.
Yes. Yes. That's a huge point that comes up in my sessions with couples a lot is we assume how our partner feels
Yeah.
about our sex life. We
Right.
assume that maybe that they're fine with our sex life and we're making, bringing it up would be making too big of a deal out of it and we should just accept it the way that it is, or we assume that they know what they're doing and we don't. And so we compare based on these assumptions, and we also can get into this feeling of feeling stuck and not knowing what to do about it when we feel embarrassed or we feel shame. And so it's easier to just ignore it than to address it. And then what tends to happen is over time, things get worse. And we wait to talk about sex until there's a problem, which at that point, it's even harder to talk about sex when there's an actual problem or concern that's interfering in other areas of your relationship now.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. I think that, whatever is happening in the bedroom is also happening outside of the bedroom. There's two things really. You can't separate the two because you're with this person so often, right? And I think that once you have this shame about talking about this topic, I think it festers. And I think that there ends up being a lot of resentment and anger. And especially if it leads to one person having a low libido and the other person having a higher libido. And then there's so much friction there. And then also, I love what Emily Nagoski says. She says to want sex is to have sex worth wanting. So if you are not enjoying that encounter, if you're not experiencing pleasure, if you're not getting what you want out of that, um, you know, I don't know, episode, or, that, um, that part of your life, you're not really going to want it, right? And then it's going to, like we learned in our course, is that it's going to end up becoming a chore. And when something is a chore, you don't really look forward to it. You don't want it, and it's just not anything that excites you.
Right. Exactly. And so this is why it's so important for couples to talk about their sex life, because it helps to not only have better sex, but it helps to increase your intimacy, your connection, your freedom, your, experience of shared pleasure together. And something that, when people ask, like, why should we have to talk about this? It's supposed to be natural and this is awkward, which is funny because when we're talking about any other activity that we do with another person, we plan for it. We talk about our preferences. Anything that you anything that you do with another person, you need to collaborate on, right? And sex with a partner is a shared experience that you create, you both contribute to.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Even like if it's like sports, right? You always have to you tell what the rules are, you tell how to play the game, you have that whole discussion. Whereas, I think that's a very good point, that any type of shared experience, you always typically most people will talk about it unless you're so familiar with it, right? That you've done it so many times. But for the most part, when you do anything, even cooking, whatever you're doing, right? You're always discussing, well, this is the way, that I normally do it. This is how it is, blah, blah. I think that's a very good point.
Yeah. An analogy I will give to couples that I work with is when you're choosing where to go out to eat. You'll ask, where do you want to go out to eat later today? What type of food are you feeling? Oh, you want Mexican? Do you want to go to this Mexican restaurant or that one? And then when you get there, you look at the menu. What are you feeling? Do you want to split something? Do you want to get different things? You talk about it. And it's similar with a sexual experience, right? We have these assumptions that we're just supposed to know what to do when we get into the bedroom and under the sheets, and X, Y, and Z is going to happen, and then orgasm, and then you're done. When in reality, the sexual experience can be so much more than that, similar to, choosing what you're going to eat when you go out to a restaurant. And talking about it is what helps each of you have an experience that feels good.
100%. Right. I mean, like, what's amazing is that I think sometimes we feel that, especially if we've been with the same person for a prolonged period of time, we feel like the other person should just know, but they don't know. They can't read our minds. They have no idea what we like, what we don't like. And you know what? They may never even have been taught. Maybe they don't even know the anatomy. And so you have to kind of start with the basics. Maybe you don't know your anatomy, right? That could be it too. I mean, you may not know. Maybe you never explored. Maybe you just have no idea what an orgasm is, what it's supposed to feel like. And so, how can you tell somebody else what you like when you don't even know what you like? And perhaps you never gave yourself permission to know what you liked, right? So there's so much there. And I think that oftentimes couples just, and especially I know that with really conservative groups, I know that a lot of times, I'm not going to talk for everyone, but I know that a lot of times, the two people that have gotten married are not sexually experienced, and may not even know their own anatomy. And I just really stress that, because I think that, it really starts with the basics, and then you have to move forward.
Yes, definitely. And then you throw in there the fact that our likes and dislikes, what turns us on and what turns us off, changes over time.
Oh,
So
yeah.
something that you enjoyed when you were 20 might be different than when you're 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. And also, we might not know what we like until we try it, just like trying a
Yes.
new food. And so this is another reason why it's important to communicate, because not only can we not assume and know what our partner likes and wants, but that can also change.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up, and I know that Marty Klein talks about that in his book, Sexual Intelligence, and just realizing that things will change as we get older. And really, the point is that realizing that you are maturing, because once you accept that things change as you get older, then you have matured sexually, right? And just exactly what you said, things that you liked earlier, you may not like later, or maybe they don't feel the same, or you just prefer something else. And that's just knowing and recognizing where you are right now at this point in your life.
Right. And not only is it important to know what we like and what our partner likes, um, it's important to know and to be, like, explicit about that or be direct and clear, because a lot of times our assumptions are not just based on what our partner used to like or what we're used to doing together in the bedroom, but also we make assumptions on what our partner likes based on what we've been told from friends or what we've seen in movies. Oh, all women love whatever it might be, type of sexual activity, but every single body is different. And also, we can make assumptions ourselves on what we think we're supposed to like or want.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm supposed to like this because my friends like this, or I saw someone doing it in a movie once. And assumptions are terrible indicators of reality.
100%, 100%. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations, right? Just to figure out what exactly it is. And I think, this is really the conversation that you and I are having right now, I think is the key in finding pleasure in your relationship, right? Finding that joy that that you would have if you really just had that conversation, a conversation that may be uncomfortable to get started, but really once you start that conversation and realize that this is a safe space to have it, then and a space without judgment. I think that's really critical, right? Because if we have that conversation with our partner, but we're judging them in the meantime while we're having that conversation, they're never going to have that conversation with us again. And they're not even going to ask you, because then they're going to fear that, oh, maybe she'll think that I'm judging her. So, I think it's really important to have these safe conversations, but let the other person know that you're not judging them, or even that you're critiquing them, right? I mean, I think there's a time and place to have these conversations, right? Perhaps not in the middle of your physical intimacy, not in the middle of having sex, but maybe, when you are outside of the bedroom, maybe like washing dishes or something like that, something completely unrelated, so that you don't ruin that future experience by, having that person replay that event and then think that you're judging them.
Right. Yes. That this conversation can feel so fragile and scary and awkward. And what you're saying is one of the reasons that it can be, because we don't either want to critique our partner or for them to feel judged, but also we're afraid that our partner is judging us. And so, always when starting a conversation about sex, I recommend for people to adopt a mindset of curiosity and think not only just how can I get curious about my partner and where they're at, but also how can I get curious about myself? And coming into it with that perspective of staying open, staying curious, and staying shame free will go far.
Yeah, I think that's really important. The curiosity, and also not judging, and making it a shame-free environment so that then the other person feels comfortable being vulnerable with you, right? Because they're just, saying anything and everything that helps them in the sexual relationship. And if they're going to feel judged, they're definitely not going to want it. I'm curious. I know that you and I talked a little bit offline, and I don't want to get too into the movie, but I know that both you and I have watched that movie, Baby Girl, and I don't want to ruin it for anyone that has not seen it. But I think one of the things in that movie was being able to discuss with your partner, right? What you like, what you don't like, without being judged.
Yes. Yes, definitely. It's I don't know how much to say without,
No,
sharing.
I know. I put you, yeah, okay, so we don't have to talk too much about it, but maybe just a little bit.
Yeah,
So, just about.
I think that it is a really important depiction and really helpful for people to see that, one, this is a struggle that a lot of couples have, and two, how much of a difference it makes when you are open and curious when your partner shares something about a sexual struggle they're having or desire versus being judgmental. To be able to have open arms and say, "Thank you for bringing this up to me. Let's talk about it together."
Yeah.
That's not quite what happened in the movie. The movie kind of shows what happens when that doesn't happen.
Just a little different, yeah. But no, absolutely 100%. And I think that is definitely one of my key takeaways is just the importance of having this open-ended conversation and being curious and not judging what your partner's likes and dislikes are. You may not agree with it, right? I mean, it doesn't mean you have to agree with everything your partner says or wants or desires, but at least giving them a space to at least air out those concerns or just talk about it
Mm,
so that um, so in the future you can have more discussions
yeah,
about what both people like.
yeah. Well, and this won't, ruin anything for the movie, and is not exactly what happens in the movie, but something that maybe could be more helpful when you are wanting to express your sexual desires to your partner, or when you're thinking about taking those first steps to talking with your partner about how you feel about your sex life or your desires, is to spend quite a bit of time with yourself around this first, and allowing yourself to get in touch with your body, with your emotions, with your needs and desires, and deciding that they matter. A lot of times we will kind of suppress our desires and our needs and what we want because we think, oh, I shouldn't ask for too much, or I should just be grateful,
Yeah.
or that doesn't matter, taking care of my family or my job or whatever it might be is more important. And so a big step is deciding that what I want matters, how I feel matters. And then two, if you can, talk with someone that you trust, whether that's your doctor, a sex therapist, a sex counselor, a sex educator, to talk with someone else about your concerns and questions that can kind of help you tease through what's going on for you, that can help you then bring that to your partner in a way that's supportive for
Mm.
your goals.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's really important what you just stated. What I'd love to hear from you is how you help. Like, what are some steps that somebody could take to start having that conversation with their partner, right? So they're in this relationship, they've been in it for whatever, however many years, and all of a sudden now they're like, I really want to change things, or I'm not experiencing pleasure, or whatever, maybe they learned something new and they're curious about it. And how can you have that conversation? Because I know a lot of people feel very awkward having that conversation. They're like, and it's so interesting because they will have been with their partner for 20 years and they've never discussed this. And now all of a sudden they have this new curiosity or likes or whatever. And they're like, I don't really think I can have that discussion with my partner.
Right. Yeah, there's been no precedent for how to have this conversation. So, the two things that I mentioned before are really helpful to, one, decide, okay, how I feel matters, right? And second, if you need extra support through, professional, that can be really helpful.
Yeah.
And then also practicing saying words out loud to yourself in the mirror, right? If maybe you've never talked about sex with someone else, even just saying the word sex out loud, saying the word intercourse, right? Whatever it is that you're going to end up wanting to talk about with your partner, practice saying those out loud by yourself to even just get comfortable saying those words can help. Another tip that I'll give is to say out loud what is happening. And that might be, I have something I want to talk about and I feel really awkward about it. I have no idea how to talk about this with you. I feel really nervous, right? You don't have to have this like perfectly polished um, speech written.
PowerPoint.
Yeah, PowerPoint. Yeah, if you do that, that's amazing and more power to you. It doesn't have to be polished. It can be awkward, and you can even name that you feel uncomfortable, and expressing that vulnerability and how
Yeah.
you feel invites your partner into that and helps them know they also don't have to have a polished response back. You're giving each other grace and space to feel how you feel and work through it together with curiosity, exploration.
Yeah, I love that. I think that also makes it so authentic, right? And not so polished as when you actually verbalize that you're a little bit nervous and you don't know how to say it and you don't have the words, but it's something you've been thinking about. And you just want to know what they think,
Mhm.
right? And then that allows for that conversation to start, even if it's a conversation you've never had your whole relationship,
Mhm.
right?
Right. And also even just to acknowledge, like, this is gonna be awkward. I haven't
Yeah.
been taught how to do this. We haven't done this before. One example actually that I really loved in Baby Girl was that she, when she said something, she went under the bed sheet to say something that she wanted to do,
Yeah.
and that can be, helpful. You can kind of be playful with it. You can, tell your partner, "Okay, I wanna say something, but I don't want us to look at each other when I say it. Can we turn around?" Right? You can do it in a way that works for you, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. It's so interesting because I think that like so many people never have this conversation, like ever. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that I think you may have said this is that, we're not taught, right? We're not taught how to have these conversations, and you can't ask somebody else to teach you who's never been taught either, right? So like say if you were to ask your parent or your sibling or whoever, and ask them, well, how do I talk about this conversation? Well, they may not know either because they were never taught and they may have the same misgivings that you do.
Mhm.
And so, just kind of practicing. And I love how you say to like practice that conversation. Um, just even looking at yourself. Sometimes you may even feel embarrassed to just look at yourself and say that whatever it is that you're thinking about, right?
Right.
So just getting used to even hearing it out loud, especially if it makes you feel uncomfortable, right? And then I think I would like get curious and ask myself, well, why do I feel so uncomfortable? Is it because I grew up with a lot of sex negativity and was told to never utter these words? Was I do I just not know very much about this and that's why I feel so uncomfortable? I think it just really gets you thinking about a lot of things, right?
Yes. Yeah, there's that curiosity of your own internal experience too. Why is this making me feel uncomfortable? Which can then help lead you to what are those next steps that I need to take, which might mean listening to more, podcasts or reading a book before approaching it with a partner. Um,
Mhm. Or taking a year-long course at the University of Michigan.
yes, yes.
And doing the SAR course and then, making a whole bunch of friends.
Yes, yes, definitely recommend. Mhm.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. So, I'd love to know also, in terms of, like, any patient stories or client stories that you've had helping patients, sorry, I keep saying patients, I mean clients, navigate this conversation that may seem so foreign to them. I'm wondering if you have any, examples of ways that you helped, clients navigate it.
Yeah, definitely. Patients, clients, either one works. Um,
Yeah.
so many of the clients that I work with have similar stories, and I there's a framework that I use that many find really helpful. A lot of
Hmm.
times clients will come in and they have their grievances toward their partner and they say, "Well, you don't do this enough. Well, you do this too
Mm,
much." And they start kind of going into this back and forth blame and defend cycle.
yeah.
And so I teach them how to get out of that. How to break that
Mm,
cycle of blaming and defending, and how do we get on the same team or on the same side of the fence?
yeah.
So one of those things, is reminding them to remind themselves before they approach a conversation, whether it's about sex or anything else in their relationship, is it's us against the problem, not us
Mm,
against each other.
I love that.
And
I
I
love that.
always have them start the conversation out with one asking, "Is this an okay time to talk?" And if not, then when is another time, preferably within 24 hours, that we can talk about this? And then as you're approaching the conversation, starting off with a statement of positive intent.
Mm,
So that could be an appreciation of your partner, something like, "I really love you and I want our relationship to thrive. And that's why I'm bringing up this topic." Rather than,
mm.
"Our sex life sucks and I'm mad about it and I'm going to, tell you why you're wrong," right? You can say,
And my lawyer is gonna hear about this.
yes, right. So, saying I really value the intimacy we share and I want to continue building it, but pain is making it really difficult. So, starting off with that statement of positive intention helps to, one, bring down the defenses, helps, reminding your partner, hey, we're on the same team. And I'm bringing this up because I care about you and because I value our relationship.
I love that example. I think that's so fantastic how you frame it, and it's how it's you against the problem, both of you, so that you're on the same team as opposed to, kind of battling back and forth, which obviously would add to more animus toward each other, which would not be helpful at all, especially when you're trying to help them. And, starting always with like something positive, right? Which is what you want to hear with any type of discussion or dialogue when you are bringing up something about, or something you wish somebody would do. You always want to start with something positive, or the fact that you love that they're always on time, or that they're, whether it's even just somebody that works for you, right? Like, I
Mhm.
love the fact that you get things done and you're on time or whatever. But, when it comes to partners, even something like, I like it when you make dinner, or,
Mhm.
something like that. And it's so fantastic that you're always taking care of the kids and blah, blah.
Right.
But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
A lot of these like basic communication skills are transferable to, we're talking with our kids, employees, employers, right? That we can transfer to talking about sex, but we kind of forget about it because when we think we have to talk about sex, we
yeah,
tend to our nervous system gets dysregulated and we forget all of those other skills that we have and that we
right.
use in other avenues of our life. But the
Yeah.
compliment sandwich is a tried and true technique.
Yeah. No, that is great. And what type of results have you seen once, clients start using this? What opens up for them?
Oh my gosh, so much. It's really,
Yeah.
really cool, and I feel so privileged to get to witness this, like, in real time. I'll see
Mhm.
clients who in our first sessions, they'll start off pretty far away from each other on the couch, and then as sessions and weeks go on, they're, like, on top of each other. I've even had a session
That's fantastic.
I've had a session once where I do telehealth. So the couple, near the end of the session, that had, gone really well. They were really connecting and they started to kiss and kind of, get on top of each other. And I was like, all right, well, I think I need to leave now. So I'm gonna hang up.
That's right. You're like, "Okay. I guess you did your job, right?"
Right.
You helped them connect. Wow, that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
So
That's
yeah, so it's really cool
amazing.
from seeing, it happen in literal real time to, couples coming back and saying, I never knew it could actually be this easy. Right?
Wow.
Coming from
Mhm.
being when they first start seeing me, not knowing how to talk to each other about it, not being able to talk about it without getting angry or, crying. And after we work together and, while we're working together, being able to comfortably and confidently express themselves, ask each other questions, try things they never thought they, would be able to try. So
Yeah.
it's really amazing to watch their confidence grow both in and out of the bedroom.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm sure that's such a huge transformation, right? Especially like you stated, if they were sitting on opposite ends of the couch and then, toward the end of your one of your sessions they're making out. I mean, that's a big transformation. That's amazing. So I love that. So for those people that, are trying to have these conversations at home, I know you mentioned a few ways to go ahead and do this, but how do you feel that, purity culture sometimes gets in the way of having these conversations?
Yeah. I think one of the first things that come to mind is that purity culture can instill this feeling that sex is dirty or bad
Mhm.
or wrong, which is really hard to just turn off after
Yes,
you get married.
correct.
And so not only can it feel dirty or wrong to, be having sex, but then bringing it up itself can feel dirty and
Yeah.
wrong. And so that's another reason why it's actually really helpful and important to talk about it because talking about it, bringing it up into the light of day is what helps decrease the shame that can come from purity culture.
I think that is so true. I was just thinking about exactly what you said, right? Like, it's not a switch that you can turn on and off, right? Before you get married, you're taught that sex is wrong, dirty, shameful. And after you get married, even though, like say for example, in Islam. So now all of a sudden now it's okay for you to have sex. But those ideas are still with you. You're still the same person unless you've made like some 180-degree shift in between the day that you were unmarried to the day that you're married. It's not going to go away. So you really have to work on those thoughts, right? And change that narrative. Otherwise, it continues out into your relationship, into your marriage. I mean, I know couples, and this is not just for Muslim couples, but couples that have been raised with a lot of sex negativity, that even they go 20 years out and they still have those um, thoughts that are holding them back, and their relationship, that's like sex is just not even part of their relationship at all, and it
Mhm.
never really was, because of those thoughts that one partner may have held and never really let go of, and never gave themselves permission, but never even tried because she was never interested to begin with. So I feel bad. I mean, I think that if that's something that you as a couple decide, then that's fantastic. That's something that you've decided, it's mutually agreed on, and sex is just not going to be a part of your relationship. You have a great friendship and you're happy just to be friends and being like roommates and living together, whatever. But if that's something that was never agreed upon before, or even during your marriage, and all of a sudden that's something you've decided by yourself, then I think that can be very difficult for the person on the other end of that relationship. And, I can that would lead to divorce or to other problems, affairs and things like that, things that are not mutually agreed upon.
Yeah.
And I think that that can be really difficult.
Yeah, definitely. Everything that you're saying, I'm feeling, so strongly from my own background and those of my clients that I've worked with. And something that I will often talk about with clients, because approaching sex, if sex is not something that you're having, or if you have sexual anxiety, sexual avoidance, maybe even pain, is not to push yourself to go faster than you're comfortable with and ready for. And so I'll talk about, what does pleasure look like in other areas of your life. We'll practice, self-touch, not, you know, not even including genitals. We're not talking about masturbation yet, just even touching, your hand. What does it feel like to give yourself to rub your hands when you're washing them, to put on lotion on your arm? Do you notice the sensations? And, that's kind of, we can get into sensate focus, but I'll do that with couples, but also with individuals who have, who struggle with approaching sex or having sex for whatever reason that might be. Is we talk about pleasure in other areas of life, strengthening the mind body connection, and also even, how do you feel about receiving pleasure? Do you feel that you deserve to feel good? Do you feel, that you deserve to feel joy? And then that can get into, some deeper trauma therapy work
Right.
that's often intertwined with our sex lives as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much there, everything what you just said, right? There's a lot there. That's why I love Sensate Focus, honestly, and I think it's for a very selfish reason, in the sense that I think it's great, not selfish, but I mean, um, a reason for people that grew up in like conservative communities, right? I think that is Sensate Focus, to me, is really like the ideal way to approach sex for somebody that's never had sex. It's such a stepwise process, and it's just, you just go on your own terms, right? There's nothing there that says you have to do this by this, you have to do that by that, but you just take it as you can, right? And you work slowly with it. And that's what I love about Sensei Focus. It's just such a stepwise approach to really, experiencing pleasure in your relationship, and also giving yourself that permission, right? And then just slowly changing, your mind about how you perhaps, viewed sex, and now slowly, hopefully, changing you more over to a sex positive mindset. But it's really a stepwise process. And, I agree that it's just not it's just not something that you can turn on or off.
Mhm.
You just gotta, you have to actually, I think you have to be really intentional about it. You have to decide that this is something that I want, and I want to change the narrative for, say, my kids or the future generation, whatever, whatever your goal is, that seems really important, bigger than yourself.
Mm,
And then work toward that, I think.
yeah. I think this approach, the sort of the slow stepping stones of sensate focus applies to communication about sex as well,
Yeah.
in that you don't have to jump in right away. If you haven't ever talked about sex with your partner before, you don't have to, jump in and say, all right, I want to talk about sex because this is important because XYZ. You can
Yeah.
start off by talking about the context of sex. Maybe you talk with your partner, how do you feel about our bedroom? How do we feel about the layout? How do you feel about our sheets, right? You can talk about things that are sort of adjacent to sex. And even before talking about sex, you can talk with each other about, or ask your partner, how do you feel about talking about sex? Right? You're not even yet asking them to talk about it. You're just asking them, how do you feel about talking about it? And you can provide a space for them to express their thoughts, and you can address any concerns. Maybe they're afraid that you're going to judge them just as you're afraid that they were going to judge you. So you can make an agreement with each other of, okay, wow, we're both afraid to talk about this. What can we do to help this feel more comfortable for
Yeah.
us?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
small steps.
Also, I think what's important in what you just said, is that, you asking them if it's okay to talk about sex, but how would they feel if you talked about sex, right? Do they feel discomfort in that, right? Is that something that they're not ready to talk about, or maybe um, they just feel so uncomfortable that they can't, not only can they not talk about it, but they can't really listen to you talk about it. I mean, I think that that's another layer that can cause a lot of friction. So I think that's really important to, I don't know, maybe have these conversations before you even get into a deep committed relationship, right?
Mhm. Yeah. It also can be helpful too to express why you want to talk about it, and even thinking about this for yourself before you bringing it up, thinking about, what does this mean to me? Why is this important for me? So many times, and I think that there's a sort of gendered narrative that we assume that men want sex because they're just horny and they want the orgasm, and women want sex because she feels like she's supposed to. When in reality, our reasons for having sex are so varied. And Emily Nagassi brings up that, in her book Come Together, there's four big reasons why we have sex. And those are for connection, a sense of freedom, shared pleasure, and feeling wanted. And so talking about what this means to us also helps to bring down those defenses and tear down some assumptions that we might have about our partner for why talk about this? Why does this matter? Why is sex important?
I love that. Yeah, that's fantastic. I actually have that book. I haven't read it. So now you're motivating me to read it, on top of the 50 other thousand books that I've ordered and haven't read. So I will get to it right away.
Yeah.
Well, this has been such a fantastic conversation, and I love talking to you, Sarah. Sarah is one of my good friends, and we have a WhatsApp with some of our other sexual health counselors and educators and therapists, and all of us talk frequently, I would say, about different topics. So it's fantastic having you on the show, as always. And so, for people that are thinking, wow, Sarah is amazing. What an amazing sex therapist to have. I wish you were in New York, Sarah, that's for sure. But tell people how they can get in touch with you, how they can follow you on Instagram and wherever else you are.
Sure. Yeah. So, as you said, I am a sex and relationship therapist. I work with clients online throughout Michigan, Illinois, and Florida. And I help individuals and couples develop confidence in and out of the bedroom. And so you can get connected with me through my website, ubloomtherapy.com. That's YOUBLOOMTHERAPY.com. And my Instagram handle is the same, at YouBloomTherapy.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. I loved our conversation. And well, it has been real and really intimate. So remember, this is not meant to be any type of medical advice or even religious advice for that matter. So if you're having any issues with either one of those things, please speak with your friendly neighborhood religious leader and healthcare provider. And until next time, this is the Muslim Sex Podcast. So thank you for listening to the podcast, and make sure you leave us a review, share and like the podcast. And if you leave me a review, I'd love to shout you out on social media. So be sure that you share it with all your friends. And thanks for listening.